my name is Ryan Cam, and welcome back to the 1999 Project, and quite possibly the most loaded 1999 Project episode that I have done in quite some time, because we have four movies this week, and all of them have some level of notoriety to them. Let's not waste any more time, let us get into it. Starting off with quite possibly the most famous movie that I'm going to be talking about this week. It is a little ditty called The Blair Witch Project. The Blair Witch Project. And if you've clicked on this video, there's a good chance that you probably know exactly what movie that I'm going to be talking about. And to help me talk about it for this portion of this video, I have, well, I don't want to announce it yet, but he's my tag partner in the Why We Love Horror Trivia League, the Wrestling with Trivia League. If there's a trivia league and there's teams, he is my partner in it. It's Eric Moreno. Eric, how you doing?
An honor to be here once again reviewing stuff. I'm especially interested in this project. I will tell you why later after we introduce it. I'm guessing people, if they already click in the video, they already know the movie, but let's build it up because it's a fantastic movie to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really just crazy to think that the Blair Witch Project is turning 25 this year, because this is honestly like it's one of the most profitable movies ever made. From what I researched, the budget was between 200,000 and 750,000. There's even a rumor that directors Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez returned the camera that they used for a refund in order to stretch the budget as much as they could. And the movie ended up making like $200 million after the fact. And I pulled that from Wikipedia, so take that with a grain of salt. But the long story short is that they were pulling Paranormal Activity numbers before Paranormal Activity. They made a movie off of six figures, and the profit on that must have been easily like eight figures, maybe seven or eight figures. So like people would kill for those numbers today or in any era. And 25 years later, Blair Witch Project is still just, it's probably not the scariest movie I've ever seen, but it's a genuinely creepy movie.
Much of the talk about the success of the movie is about the marketing and how cheap it was and how it convinced people that it was kind of real and kind of creepy and all of that is it's sort of true. Like as a person that's also turning 25 this year, I wasn't alive then by the time the movie released, but I am very aware of the magnitude of that type of release, of the stuff it did to popularize the found footage subgenre of horror. Like it's definitely not the first found footage horror movie. That would be Cannibal Holocaust, probably the best known one. That's way earlier than Blair Witch, but it's definitely the one that's set itself in the minds of the people. Oh, this type of movie kind of scares me because it feels the realest that a horror movie can be.
I think the earliest found footage movie was either Cannibal Holocaust or The Legend of Boggy Creek. I'm sure someone out there watching this will know for certain. But this is the one that really set the genre for like the modern age. This is the one that made the difference, really. One of the fascinating things I learned about the marketing of this was that at Sundance, where this movie premiered, instead of like posters promoting that this is in fact a movie, they threw up wanted posters with the three actors who play the main roles of saying, "Have you seen this person?" Like it was literal wanted or missing posters. And on IMDb for at least a year, it was said when they were credited, there was underneath it presumed missing under their names. So they committed to the bit, and that's something that you would never be able to pull off today because the internet was around back then, but it wasn't like to the degree that we have it
One
now.
of the main appeals of the movie, like if you see something about current movies, they are rarely set in current era because the telephones are so prevalent right now, the internet and all that. So most movies right now take place like in the past. Like they're starting to make movies now set in the 2000s because that's a like many movies will be so much quicker to end if the character had a telephone or something like that. This is one of those movies. Like probably they could find themselves like a part of the appeal of the movie. Yeah, it's a sort of realistic approach to how do you say to find yourself in a scary and stressful situation. And that's one of the reasons the movie appeals to me, especially because, like, yeah, you can get scared because voices are out of 10, and especially the ending is pretty good, even if you actually don't see that much. But it's the stress and the what you wouldn't call it camaraderie, because they aren't like super friendly with each other at the beginning, but they stress each other as well, and that kind of makes it more like the movie makes or breaks if you find the characters appealing. I myself find them appealing because I also studied film, so I have made films with my friends and uh, got into some sort of not scary situation, nothing on that level, but definitely you can start blaming each other for something missing, for and especially in their situation, where especially the character of Heather is so the very famous scene where she has a confession in front of the camera that she did in fact get lost. She didn't actually make the recon of the area. She didn't admit it earlier. Like that's both, like, you can say, that's a stupid character decision that probably you see in a horror movie, but I think it's actually like it's understandable at the very least. Like, it's not your typical stupid decision that you will see. We both saw the Paranormal Activity for trivia purposes, and we kind of both agree that that movie, even if it also sold itself as a realistic depiction of that, the characters that make much worse decisions in a much easier to resolve situation, as opposed to the Blair Witch Project, which is kind of understandable, being that they are in the woods, they don't have phones, they didn't prepare themselves with, like, I mean, they do mention like a compass and all that, but they kind of don't, they do not have expertise to go through the woods as probably some of them more prepared. So it makes sense that they will be stressed, alongside the fact that there's probably a witch haunting them around them.
Yeah, God help me for when I review those paranormal activity movies one day because I'm gonna have a lot to say on the topic. One of the things I learned from Heather Donahue, who did an interview at Comic-Con, I think the year that this movie came out, I found on the Wayback Machine an interview she did at, I don't want to say San Diego Comic-Con, but it was a Comic-Con where she was promoting the movie. And one person asked her if there was like a script of like certain things she had to do, and she was said like a good chunk of the dialogue was all improvised. And I think that really helps the movie in the grand scheme of things because like you were talking about, these people are lost in the woods. So like I think there's a certain realism to that, in that if you're lost in the woods, there's only so much you can do to where you'd be like, okay, here I am. I think I can find my way out of this. And I think generally there's just it handles the whole lost thing about as good as one can expect from something like this. It doesn't like it doesn't give necessarily an easy out. And because this movie takes place in 1994, technology out there is almost non-existent. They don't have Google Maps. They don't have really anything except camera equipment. And it's up to them to just basically logic their way out of it. And at a certain point, logic just goes completely out the window.
They had, I don't think the dialogue is like, um, what would you compare it now? Like, when you talk about really good dialogue, you kind of expect the big words, and especially in the 90s with Tarantino or Kevin Smith, like a big, how you say, um, popular media stuff, and they do talk about it a little bit, but mostly I think the dialogue especially kind of shines when their discussions are made. Like, for example, in the scene where Mike admits that he kicked the map of the creek, like he kind of starts laughing at first because I've been in a situation where I've done an embarrassing stuff. Like, I kind of laugh about it first before admitting to, and then the fireworks come out and people start screaming at each other. And I think that scene really shines.
The thing that I appreciated leading up to them going into the forest was the interviews with the townspeople of Burkittsville, Maryland. I really did appreciate that. There's a lived-in quality to those interviews where these people have heard the legend, and there's also a degree for some of them like, these dumbass kids. Like, it's subtle, but it is there. There's not a, oh no, don't go there. You don't want to go there. Like, it's not like over the top. They're just very matter of fact of, yeah, I heard about it, but it's probably best that you don't go in there. There's very much a matter of factness to it that I appreciated.
Yeah, there's the famous trope. They call it the harbinger of doom in the Cabin in the Woods movies. Like a character tells you about, oh, this place is dangerous, you shouldn't go there, and the dumbass kids always go there. And the way they do it in the Blair Witch is, as you said, like it's very matter of fact. It's kind of funny in a way because they are talking to the fishermen by the forest with the two fishermen, and the one says, "Ah, yeah, I heard of that and that." And I saw that. I wasn't drinking that day. It makes it, as you said, yeah, kind of lived in. The other interview I really like in the previous to that is the one where the mother is telling the story and she's carrying her kid, and the kid, no, don't talk about it. Like that, like it covers her mouth. That don't tell the scary story. Like it makes it. It's kind of a trope right now that they kind of do that stuff. And I was thinking, going back to the Paranormal Activity and how much it kind of misses some of that stuff. That the last one, Next of Kin, kind of starts like that. Like a crew just hanging out, getting the equipment and doing the interviews and all that, and it doesn't feel as lived in, mostly because there's an appeal that the Blair Witch Project has that it looks cheap, but it doesn't. It's not a detriment. It's a how you call it? What's the phrase normally used? Like it's a feature, not a bug. Like it is
Yeah.
actually better for that movie to look like that, and that's kind of something that other movies that try to do the same, like the Paranormal Activity movies, like they don't have, as opposed to the Blair Witch Project that makes it more appealing because of that.
One of the common complaints of found footage movies is people be like, why are they filming everything? I don't understand. But there's a good reason why these kids are doing this. They're making a documentary. So by proxy, they basically have to film everything. If your documentary is going to be good, you need a crap ton of footage and you can edit it down later. So they basically have to film everything. And so in order for like to believe that there is a Blair Witch out there, they need to basically do all of these things. And the thing that I appreciated, and I learned this, I was watching a review of this movie before I jumped on with you, said there was actually something in regards to there was actually supposed to be someone playing a physical Blair Witch. There was supposed to be a scene where Heather was like, "What is that?" And like the camera pans left, and then all of a sudden there's a figure there dressed in white in the shadow. Like you can't get a good look at him, but that very clearly was supposed to be a witch, like a Blair Witch, but that never happened. I personally think the movie's better for it that they don't do something like that. Because Roger Ebert in his review said something along the lines of the genius of this movie is what you don't see. And that is like that's why this movie is as good as it is. It's because these people are freaking out and you're just like, what is going on? I don't understand. But it doesn't really clue you in. Like it lets you put two and two together in your mind and you realize, yeah, these people are in trouble. And you don't know why, but they're not going to make it out of this. And well, spoiler alert, but none of them do.
Yeah, it's great that you mentioned the fact that they. I didn't know that, so that's kind of cool. A cool fact that they tried to put a witch, but they decided not to, or they couldn't afford it, whatever. It reminds me of obviously that one of the greatest movies of all time, regardless of genre, Jaws. Like they originally wanted to show much more of the shark, and because of budget and all the robotics and all that, it wasn't available at the time. It's much better when you don't actually see the shark in its in full form. Like you get to see it at the very end, and it's also really great when you show him. But the scary stuff is what you don't see. And not to go back to the Paranormal Activity, well, because you can attack that franchise when you get the chance to. Well, like the worst one is arguably the Ghost Dimension, which is the one that actually shows you the ghosts and all that with that awful camera and all that. That kind of the whole point of that franchise was be afraid of what you don't see, like what happens when you're asleep, and that idea that you can make a found footage film when you show the stuff, like it's fine, but showing the actual manifestation of the ghost kind of ruins this purpose. And I think that's also what one of the reasons it makes it Blair Witch. If you wanted to go that route, you could argue maybe nothing was actually happening and they killed each other or whatever. I don't actually subscribe to that theory, but I've heard of it. Like it makes it more ambiguous to the stuff that is happening to them. Like it's much better for it. I will also agree with that.
Yeah, we see a ton of the shark in Jaws the Revenge, and that movie has too many problems, but like that like that movie to your Jaws point, like that movie is far better when you don't see the shark. They add the shark more in Jaws 2, 3D, and Revenge, and those movies, well, with the exception of Jaws 2, I actually think Jaws 2 is not bad, but 3 and 4 are just awful. But that's another story for a whole nother time. I think we go back to the paranormal activity in this one because that's like the biggest found footage series of all time, at least modern day. And I think it's the biggest, maybe the biggest found footage cinematic universe that's still
Like,
kind of going. I mean, Next of
what's the
Kin.
competition? It's probably VHS, the other franchise that does found footage as often. Like, yeah, or maybe Rec. If you want to go international, Rec is probably the most well known outside of the paranormal activity. At least with one continuous series of events, like the same characters and all that. Kind of with paranormal activities, the same characters. Like,
I
yeah,
mean, VHS is kind of exclusive to Shudder at this point, so I don't know if we can call it the biggest. I mean, longest running, I think that could be a debate, but VHS is almost pretty much at this point exclusive to Shudder, if my memory serves.
well, the last
But
one of the paranormal activities was also exclusive to streaming, as far as I remember. So they are kind of going that
Paramount
way.
Paramount Plus, weirdly, which I mean, Paramount produced all the movies, so it makes sense in that regard. But I don't know, like considering how profitable Paranormal Activity has been, the fact that they released it exclusive to Paramount Plus was just weird. I mean, it must have been a COVID thing, I guess. But
Yeah, it was released in January of 2021, so it was totally a pandemic stuff. But also, like, you have to go back to the Next of Kin. That's the movie that everybody talks about. Like, this doesn't have anything to do with the franchise. It's just a movie very similar to Midsommar, but in found footage, and put the paranormal activity tag to sell it a little bit. So I don't think it was much of a miss that they didn't put that in theaters, because it would have been, at the time they couldn't, but also it wouldn't have made that much, especially because the Ghost Dimension was also. I don't think it was a super flop, or anything like that, but I do remember it not being as successful as probably the second Paranormal Activity or the third, that they were still riding high on that buzz of the franchise.
yeah, but as far as Blair Witch goes, this might be one of the most famous like movie endings, like modern movie endings ever, because we get the iconic shot of Heather's eye looking directly into the camera, and then we get the two of they get the going into the dilapidated house. We get I can't remember if it's John or Michael, but it's like standing against the wall, like looking all creepy and all of that, and then just the camera drops, and then you just hear screaming, and then you don't see what happens, but it's unsettling because you don't know, like definitely the Blair Witch has them, but because we don't know what the Blair Witch looks like, it's like a sense of, yeah, these people are either dead or we just heard them dying. So like creepiest modern movie endings of all time for my money.
Yeah. Almost every found footage movie afterwards kind of ends the same. Like, even the very good ones, like Rec ends kind of the same. Like, a camera falls. That's kind of the easiest way to end the found footage. Like, the camera falls, and probably the character carrying it died, and that's probably the movie that popularized that. I will have to check kind of a Holocaust to make sure of that. Like, it's probably the first one to do so, but it's also probably the one that does it the most effectively, because, like, to go back, I can't help comparing to Paranormal Activity, because the one that people associate most with found footage, and the one that repopularized the genre. But Blair, also one of the greatest things about the Blair Witch Project is actually escalates, as opposed to starts and stops showing stuff. Like, it starts. It actually I remember it last time I saw it. Like, I thought it took a while to get going, and now that I look about it, first of all, the movie's like 81 minutes tops. Like, it's very short, so it actually starts pretty quickly. They go to the interviews, they go to the forest and all that, and then it gets going barely quickly. Like, I don't think it takes a while to start, but when it starts happening, the like both the tension between the characters and the stuff happening around them actually escalates in tension, and it ends in a very particular way, as opposed to the Paranormal Activity that starts and stuff like day one, day two, day three, and happens something, and then the morning, the whatever, and then a character does a stupid decision, and again something scary. Blair Witch actually escalates, even if it isn't as eventful as a Paranormal Activity movie, but the tension actually goes somewhere and ends in a very great way that, yeah, many other found footage movies end the same, because it's a very good way to end that type of movie.
Yeah, to kind of bring things to a close, the overarching theme of the movie, or well, not theme, but the like the pacing of the movie is it starts out like introducing you to the three filmmakers, showing Burkittsville, showing the town, and then straight into the forest. That takes up like maybe 20 minutes, and then the
Yeah,
rest of the
tops. Yeah.
remaining hour of the movie is just them in the forest. And like you said, it hits that gas and it doesn't slow down. It was like as soon as like they enter the forest, stuff starts happening. You see the stick men everywhere at a certain point. I'm like, well, there's no turning back now. And then everything just goes completely pear-shaped. And it's a gradual thing, but once the car stops, there is no stopping it. And at the end of the day, this movie is efficient as all get out. For 87 minutes, the movie flies. And I've said in reviews before, run times are really not a problem for me. It's the pacing that is the issue. 90-minute movies can feel like 3 hours and vice versa. It's really what they do with their minutes. This movie flies by. For this movie, I'm giving it an amazing grade. It's one of the best found footage movies ever made. It basically formed the identity of the genre for at least a decade, maybe less than that. Like until the first Paranormal Activity came along, this is the thing that people associated with found footage horror. And it's it spawned two sequels, which Book of Shadows is awful. Like I have a review of that up here already. But the Blair Witch movie with Adam Wingard directing it, I remember liking it, but not loving it. I'll have to rewatch it now. But to make the long story short, the Blair Witch Project, in my opinion and Eric's opinion, has stood the test of time.
Yeah, totally. Like, I don't count it as my personal favorites because one thing that I probably would say about the movie is not very rewatchable. Like, probably you wouldn't see it time and time again. But that's not a flaw. I don't take it against it for most horror movies. Like, some movies you kind of want to rewatch because they are easy to watch, like a horror comedy or something with much more dialogue, as opposed to Blair Witch, which you will see time to time, but you wouldn't. That's why I probably wouldn't give it like 5 stars as opposed to the 4 I would probably give it. And also, probably just to mention it really quick, like the only issue I think with the characters, like I think I remember Mike and Josh having very distinct personalities when they get stressed, and then they kind of change. Like kind of Mike takes over more of a passive, but no more mediator role, and Josh is the one that goes missing. So kind of they kind of set up like, oh, he's the one that kind of goes crazy first. And at the beginning, it was actually Mike who was the more combative type, the one that's going against Heather's like issues. But that's probably an issue with the dialogue and all that, like the way it was improvised. I probably they didn't set up like a particular way to change the characters. Like I think Heather, both the actress and the character, are the most focused because she changes, but not in a way that if she has an arc of sorts. And Josh and Mike had opposite sides and then kind of trade. And I don't think if it was on purpose, it doesn't look like it. It looks like maybe I'm going to do that stuff, and maybe Josh is the one going crazy, goes missing, and all that. So that's probably my only issue with the movie. But yeah, I definitely think it's to the test of time. As somebody who didn't grow up like thinking it was real, it still manages to be scary as opposed to a Paranormal Activity to take that one last shot at it. Like I always remember it being called like very scary because people thought it was real, and I never thought so. So it doesn't scare me as opposed to Bear Witch, which other people thought it was real, and I saw it with that in mind. That knowing it wasn't real, it still creeps me out. So I think definitely stood the test of time. Out of those type of it all. Sorry, got trapped. It definitely should be ahead in the minds of people when regards to found footage horror movies.
I agree. Well, Eric, I gotta move on to my next movie here, but thank you so much for joining me. I don't know, even though I've known you for a while now, I'm not sure. Do you have like a YouTube, like Letterboxd? Obviously, I'll post that in the description. Do you have anything you want to promote?
Yeah, I don't think there's many crossover between people who watch your channel and people who speak Spanish, but I do have a YouTube channel that I haven't uploaded in a while, but I will recommend. If I haven't talked much horror in there, but I have some pretty good videos if you want to look it over. It's a spoiler, like you probably could put it in the description, not just to not waste too much time trying to explain why. But it's probably the most prominent thing if you look for spoiler, like I said, it's in Spanish. So if you want to give it give some support, I would appreciate it, even if I haven't done much of the that stuff in a while. And you can check out the trivia leagues. I'm with Jacob in most tag team leagues, wrestling, horror. We're maybe soon to be the tag horror champions. That could be great. And yeah, you can find me anywhere. You can find Jacob probably.
Yeah, that match has been filmed already. I'm not sure when it's going to be dropping. This coming week, we got singles tournament matches in that league, which Eric is competing in, and he's probably going to win. And I might be slightly biased. He is my tag team partner, but he is seriously like one of the smartest trivia players I've ever come across, and I mean that without an ounce of irony or sarcasm. His channel's linked in the description. Go give him a subscribe there. And as far as this video goes, we're going to be continuing on with a rapid and swift change in the content of what I'm going to be talking about. The next movie up in this video I'm going to be talking about is a little ditty called Muppets from Space.
Celebrate good times, come on! Muppets from Space.
Muppets from Space was directed by Tim Hill, and it starred Jeffrey Tambor, Pat Hingle, Hulk Hogan, yes, really, David Arquette, yes, also really, both cameos, and Ray Liotta, also a cameo. And the Muppets are there too. The Muppets are back. This time around, the great Gonzo is feeling very lonely and is looking for his own kind. Well, through a series of very convoluted and funny events, he finds his kind in space. This is a rather notorious Muppets movie. It was the last theatrically released one until 2011, that is. And this was the last Muppet movie with Jim Henson's production company and Sony, as the franchise would be bought by Disney in 2004. I didn't know what to expect from this movie other than the fact that the Muppets are genuinely delightful. I mean, how can you hate the Muppets? You just can't. And really, how can you hate this movie? You just can't. The movie is just delightful from start to end. Some mixed reviews for this one, and to be perfectly honest, I don't understand why. Because this movie was just it was just delightful. It was really funny on a lot of occasions, weird on a lot of occasions, but it just kind of fit in with the aesthetic. Of course, the puppetry is fantastic. I mean, it's the Henson family, so of course they know what they're doing by this point. But this is honestly a pretty nice little story. Gonzo, feeling lonely, could be treated very juvenile-y. But they don't do that. They actually treat it with a good amount of respect. There's a pretty good little scene in which, after all the Muppets have breakfast, Gonzo sees the family photos of like Kermit with Robin, and just seeing all of the family photos there, and Gonzo is there alone on the beach, looking out like at the end of the Shawshank Redemption or something. And it broke my heart a little bit. Like I said, this is a Muppet movie, however, there are cameos here. Hulk Hogan, like I mentioned, where he cuts a promo on Rizzo the Rat before sending him into rat jail. Yes, really. David Arquette, two former WCW champions in this movie, by the way. Ray Liotta has a brief cameo as a security guard. I enjoyed that. Jeffrey Tambor plays the head of this search for extraterrestrial intelligence type of place. It's called CavNet, but it's Jeffrey Tambor, so of course he's good. Andie MacDowell plays a newscaster, a role that she is very familiar with. Honestly, like I said, this movie is it's just a hoot. I mean, everything down to the soundtrack. The Muppets get ready for the day in this movie while soundtrack to Brick House by the Commodores. You cannot possibly hate this movie. It is impossible. It's getting an amazing grade. I don't know if I'm giving this because it's a guilty pleasure or it's just the fact that it just made me feel so good inside, but it just gave me a pep in my step. What can I say? But now let's take a hard left in terms of content, but these two movies share a bit of a link in that both of these movies are the last of something. The Muppets from Space was the last theatrically released film by Jim Henson Productions as an independent entity. And the next movie I'm going to be talking about was the last movie of one of the greatest directors of his generation, Stanley Kubrick. It is Eyes Wide Shut.
You ever pray with all your heart and soul just to walk away? Yeah. Give it a bad, bad thing.
Eyes Wide Shut was directed by Stanley Kubrick. It starred Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, and it tells the story of a man and a woman who are married. They have a daughter. They have a very nice life together on paper. However, after a very bad trip on weed, Nicole Kidman's character admits that she fantasized about sleeping with another man. And so, in an act of revenge, I suppose, Tom Cruise's character goes out and finds a secret society in which they like to do each other a lot. Like I mentioned, and rather famously, this is the last movie directed by the great Stanley Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick's credits don't really need to be gone over in great detail. 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, I could go on. The man he just was one of the greatest to ever do it. This was not supposed to be his last movie, though. After he was supposed to wrap up on Eyes Wide Shut, he was supposed to then jump on to direct AI Artificial Intelligence, which was supposed to be produced by Steven Spielberg, a good friend of Stanley Kubrick. However, Kubrick unfortunately passed away just very soon after production on Eyes Wide Shut wrapped. And so Spielberg ended up directing AI while Kubrick would enter a producer role posthumously. I already have a video dedicated to Eyes Wide Shut on this channel, so I don't want to go into the movie any more than I have to here, because my thoughts on the movie remain about the same, in that this movie is very well made, it's very well directed, it's very well acted, but this is just so weird. Tom Cruise's character is told that his wife had a fantasy about another man, and so his response is to actually cheat on his wife with a sex cult?
You what?
Like I said, this movie is just straight bizarre, but it is very well made, and so I am going to give this a good rating. I'm not going to go any higher than that because the weirdness and just the implications therein knock the movie down for me in terms of quality. But I cannot deny that this is still a very well-made movie from a technical side of things. I would have loved to have seen what Kubrick would have done with artificial intelligence, not like ChatGPT. I'm talking about the movie with Haley Joel Osment. I'm sure you understood what I meant. But sadly, we'll just never know. But now let's take another hard left in terms of content. Let's go from a really, really artsy-fartsy kind of movie about a married couple having a fight and then just the response to that fight to four individuals fighting off a gigantic crocodile. It's Lake Placid.
Lake Placid.
Placid was directed by Steve Miner, and it starred Bill Pullman, Bridget Fonda, Brendan Gleeson, and Oliver Platt, among others. It's the story of a little town in Maine that is being hunted. Well, the residents of the town are being hunted by a gigantic crocodile, like the biggest crocodile you will probably ever see. And so it is up to the town sheriff, played by Brendan Gleeson, a fish and wildlife agent, played by Bill Pullman, and an expert from a museum, played by Bridget Fonda, along with an eccentric billionaire with a thing for crocodiles, played by Oliver Platt, to stop the crocodile once and for all. I didn't know what to expect from this one until I started talking to friend of the channel, Austin Pez Howell. He was on with me to talk about The Mummy and Godzilla vs. Destroyer. He has a big thing for nature survival movies like this one, and he absolutely loves this movie, and now so do I. And let me not get it twisted. This is not like cinema. This is a movie that knows exactly what it is. It is a creature feature. It is about people fighting a gigantic crocodile. But it makes no pretensions beyond exactly what it's supposed to be. This movie knows exactly what it is. It leans into that skid, and it works. All the actors do a fine job. Bill Pullman is predictably good, Bridget Fonda is very good as well, but the actors that I loved the most were Brendan Gleeson and Oliver Platt. Brendan Gleeson, bless his soul, is trying to do an American accent and kinda is not doing a super good job with it. But bless him, he tries. And Oliver Platt plays what I imagine most people think Elon Musk is supposed to be. One of the highlights of the movie was just seeing Gleason and Platt play off of each other. They have sitcom dad level chemistry, and it's beautiful to see because Oliver Platt just constantly busts Gleason's balls throughout the entire movie, and Gleason's just like, if you don't get out of here, I'm going to do something to you. It's beautiful to see, it really is. Titular crocodile was designed by Stan Winston. Yes, the Stan Winston you're thinking of, the guy who came up with the dinosaurs for Jurassic Park. And the crocodile predictably looks really good. There's some wonky CGI, but it's 99. The CGI was not completely polished yet. And there is a practical crocodile built in this, so I have no problems. The crocodile that Stan Winston built was 32 feet long. Stan Winston, you absolute freaking legend. This is not going to go in the Criterion Collection. This is not going to win. It did not win any major awards. This is very much man versus crocodile. But this is one of the best examples of that little animal nature survival genre. Not exactly Jaws quality, but a movie that understands its assignment and leans into its cheesy skid as much as it can. I'm going to give this a great rating. This was a ton of fun, and I recommend it wholeheartedly. But what did you think of any of the movies I've talked about? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to read what you have to say. My name is Ryan Cam, and I'll see you in the next one.